Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our English podcast. I'm Jimmy, and today we have something really exciting for you. We're talking about English for real life, what they never teach in school. You see, when we learn English in school, we usually get the rules, the grammar, and maybe some vocabulary lists. But in the real world, people don't always speak like the textbooks. They use expressions, little habits, and ways of speaking that you don't always hear in the classroom. That's what we're going to explore today. And remember, if you enjoyed this conversation and you want to keep improving your English, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more free lessons.
Yes, exactly, Jimmy. I think this topic is perfect for anyone who feels like they can read English or pass an exam, but still struggles when talking to real people. Maybe you've learned, "How are you?" and "I am fine, thank you," in school, but when you go to an English-speaking country, you hear people saying things like, "Hey, what's up?" or "How's it going?" and you're not sure how to respond. That's because there's a big difference between textbook English and everyday English. In this episode, we're going to focus on the kind of English that real people use every single day, at work, with friends, at the supermarket, or even when chatting online. And yes, we'll give you examples you can actually use.
Right. Let's start with something simple. Greetings. In school, you probably learned good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. These are correct and polite, but the truth is, in daily life, people often use much more casual phrases. For example, in the morning, a friend might say morning without the good, or they might just say hey or hi there. You don't always need to be formal unless you're in a very professional situation. And here's a little tip. If you want to sound friendly, you can add the person's name after your greeting. For example, hey Sarah or morning Tom. That makes the conversation feel more personal.
That's a good point, Jimmy. And you know, another thing people do is combine greetings with small talk. For example, instead of just saying hi, someone might say, "Hi, how's your day going?" Or, "Hey, how have you been?" This is not a question that needs a long, detailed answer. It's just a way to start a conversation. You can answer simply with, "Good, thanks, and you?" Or, "Not bad, what about you?" The key is to keep it light and natural. Textbooks don't always tell you this, but in real life, people use small talk to connect, not to get deep information.
Exactly. And small talk is something that many English learners find difficult. You might think, why talk about the weather or the weekend? It's not important. But in English-speaking cultures, small talk is like social glue. It makes people feel comfortable. For example, if you're waiting for a bus and someone says, "Nice day, isn't it?" You don't have to explain the weather report. You can just agree and say, "Yeah, it's beautiful today," or "Yeah, a bit hot though." Short, friendly answers keep the conversation going.
I love that. And speaking of small talk, here's one thing that always surprises learners. People often talk about food. In an office, someone might say, "What are you having for lunch?" Or, "I'm starving, I can't wait to eat." It's not really about the food, it's just an easy, friendly topic. So if someone asks you, "What did you have for dinner last night?" you don't have to give a full recipe. You can just say, "Oh, I had pasta," or "I had chicken and rice." Then you can ask them the same question. It's about sharing, not about giving perfect answers.
That's so true, Sarah. And here's another example of what they don't teach you in school: filler words. In textbooks, sentences are clean and perfect, but in real conversations, people use little words like, well, actually, kind of, and I mean. For example, instead of saying, "I don't like coffee," a person might say, "Well, I'm not really into coffee." These fillers give you time to think and make your speech sound more natural. But be careful, don't use them too much or it can sound like you're unsure.
Yes, and I think another big difference between classroom English and real English is how people ask for things. In school, you might learn, "I would like a coffee, please." That's fine in a formal setting, but in everyday life, most people just say, "Can I get a coffee?" or "Could I have a coffee?" These are quicker, easier, and still polite if you use the right tone of voice. And here's a little cultural tip. In many English-speaking countries, it's normal to smile when you order something. It's a small thing, but it makes you sound more friendly.
Speaking of ordering, let's talk about how people give answers that are not direct yes or no. In school, you might learn to say, yes, I do, or no, I don't. But in real life, someone might say, yeah, sure, of course, or even why not for yes. For no, they might say, I don't think so, or not really. These little phrases make you sound more natural. If you only use yes, I do and no, I don't, it can sound a bit too formal or robotic.
I agree, and I think this is especially important for making friends or talking in casual situations. Imagine you're invited to go somewhere, and your friend says, do you want to grab a coffee later? If you say, yes, I do, it's correct, but it feels a little cold. If you say, yeah, sounds great, it feels much warmer. In real life, people care about how you say something, not just if it's grammatically perfect.
Exactly. And here's another thing we don't always hear in classrooms, the power of softening your language. In English, if you want to sound polite or avoid sounding too direct, you can add little phrases like maybe, I think, or a bit. For example, instead of saying you're wrong, you can say I think you might be mistaken or maybe that's not correct. This is especially important in English-speaking cultures where being too direct can sometimes sound rude.
Yes, and it works the same when giving opinions. In school, you might learn to say, I like this, or I don't like this. But in real life, you can say, I'm not a big fan of this, or it's not really my thing. These are softer and more conversational. It's small changes like these that make your English sound more like a native speaker's.
And one more point before we move to our next section, idioms. In school, you might get a list of idioms, but in real life, people use them without thinking. For example, instead of saying, I'm very tired, you might hear, I'm worn out, or I'm beat. Instead of, let's start, someone might say, let's kick things off. Learning these common expressions can make it much easier to understand people and join conversations.
Definitely. But for our listeners, here's an important reminder. Don't try to use too many idioms at once. It can sound unnatural if you force them. Instead, start by listening for them in movies, podcasts, or conversations. Pick one or two that you like and practice using them in the right situation. Over time, they will become part of your natural speaking style.
That's the key. Practice in real-life situations. And speaking of real life, after the break, we're going to talk about how to respond when you don't understand something, how to keep a conversation going, and how to sound confident even if you're not sure about your English. These are skills that are just as important as grammar, maybe even more.
Yes, so stay with us and remember, if you're enjoying this conversation, hit the like button and subscribe. It's free for you, but it means a lot to us, and we want to keep bringing you useful tips like these. Okay, let's get into the next part, real-life conversation survival skills.
So, Sarah, let's talk about what happens when you don't understand something in a conversation. This is such a common problem for English learners, but nobody really teaches you what to say. In school, they might give you formal phrases like, could you repeat that, please? Which is fine, but in real life, there are many other ways to ask. For example, you can say, sorry, what was that? Or, I didn't catch that. These are very common and sound natural. You can also say, sorry, can you say that again? And if you need them to speak more slowly, you can add, a bit slower, please. The key is to be polite, but not too formal, so it feels friendly.
Yes, and I think it's important to remember that even native speakers ask people to repeat things. It's not a sign of weakness or bad English, it's just normal human communication. Sometimes the other person speaks too quickly, or there's background noise, or they use a word you don't know. I also like to teach people a trick. If you only understood part of the sentence, repeat the part you heard and let the other person finish. For example, if someone says, I'm heading to the something something, you can say, you're heading to the, and they'll naturally fill in the missing words. It's a great way to keep the flow without feeling lost.
That's a great tip. And while we're talking about keeping the flow, let's cover conversation fillers, those little phrases that give you time to think and show you're listening. If someone is telling you a story, you can use words like, right, yeah, I see, oh really, or that's interesting. These don't add new information, but they show the other person you're paying attention. In school, we often focus on long, perfect sentences, but in real life, these short reactions are just as important for sounding engaged.
Absolutely. And here's another thing many learners don't realize. You don't always need to answer a question with a full sentence. For example, if someone asks, "Do you want to join us for lunch?" you can just say, "Sure," or "Sounds good." That's completely normal. Of course, you can add more if you want, but short answers are part of natural speech. Sometimes giving too long an answer can sound unusual in casual conversation.
Exactly. And on the other side, sometimes you need to give a longer answer to keep the conversation going. For example, if someone asks, "How was your weekend?" and you only say, "Good," the conversation will die quickly. Instead, you could say, "Good, thanks. I went to the park and had a picnic with some friends. What about you?" That way, you're sharing a little bit more and also inviting the other person to talk. It's like playing a game of tennis. You keep the ball moving back and forth.
That's a perfect example, Jimmy. And I think that's something learners can practice easily. Always giving a little extra detail when answering open questions. If someone asks, "What do you do?" you could just say, "I'm a student." But you could also say, "I'm a student. I'm studying computer science, and I really enjoy it." That gives the other person more to work with. It also helps you practice speaking for longer without stopping.
And speaking for longer brings us to another important skill, telling short stories. In real life, people often share little personal experiences. You don't have to be a comedian or a great storyteller. Just share something simple that happened to you. For example, if you were late because the bus broke down, you could say, "I was on my way here and the bus just stopped in the middle of the street. We had to wait for another one and it took forever." That's much more interesting than just saying, "I was late."
Yes, and telling stories in English is a great way to sound more confident. You can practice by using a simple structure. First, say when or where it happened. Second, say what happened. And finally, give your reaction. For example, "Yesterday, I went to the supermarket. The power went out and all the lights turned off. It was kind of scary, but also a little funny." This way, even a short event becomes a mini story, and people love listening to them.
That's a good point. And you know, Sarah, one thing that's not in textbooks is how people actually change topics in a conversation. In school, you might just jump from one topic to another, but in real life, people use little phrases like, "by the way," or "speaking of," or "that reminds me." For example, if we're talking about food and I want to talk about a new restaurant, I might say, "Speaking of food, have you tried that new pizza place?" These small transitions make your speech smoother and more natural.
Exactly, and transitions also help when you want to end a conversation politely. Instead of just walking away or going silent, you can say, "Anyway, I should get going," or, "Well, it was nice talking to you." These small phrases make a big difference in how friendly you sound. In English-speaking cultures, people often value these soft, polite ways of starting and ending interactions.
And let's not forget body language, because real-life English isn't just about words. If you keep your arms crossed, don't make eye contact, and never smile, even perfect English can feel cold. On the other hand, if you smile, nod, and use a friendly tone, people will enjoy talking to you, even if your grammar isn't perfect. That's why I always say confidence and friendliness are just as important as vocabulary.
Yes, and confidence can be built step by step. A lot of learners think they have to speak perfectly before they speak at all, but that's not true. You learn by doing. Even if you make mistakes, most people won't mind. In fact, many native speakers will encourage you and even help you find the right word if you get stuck. So don't wait until your English is perfect. Start using it in small ways every day.
That's a powerful point. And here's something else. When you don't know a word, don't panic. In school, they might make you feel like you must know every vocabulary word, but in real life, you can describe things instead. For example, if you forget the word umbrella, you can say, "the thing you use when it rains." People will understand you. And the more you do this, the better your communication skills become.
Exactly. And sometimes you can even use your hands or point to something. Communication is about making the other person understand you, not about passing a test. I've had conversations with people where I didn't know all the words, but we still understood each other perfectly because we used descriptions, gestures, and simple sentences.
And that's the big secret. Real-life English is not about speaking like a textbook. It's about connecting with people. It's about listening, reacting, asking questions, and sharing a little about yourself. Once you start thinking this way, you realize that mistakes don't stop communication. Silence does. If you keep talking, keep smiling, and keep showing interest, people will want to talk to you.
Yes, and I think we should end today's episode with a little challenge for our listeners. Next time you speak English, I want you to focus on one thing from today's conversation. Maybe using a new greeting, telling a short story, or trying a new way to ask someone to repeat something. Just choose one skill and practice it. Then, when you feel comfortable, add another one. That's how you build real-life English skills.
That's a great idea. And remember, everyone, don't be afraid to take small steps. Even if you just start by saying, "Hey, how's it going?" to someone instead of the usual, "How are you?" That's progress. Over time, these small changes will make your English sound more natural and confident.
And of course, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us which tip you're going to try first. We read all your comments, and it makes us so happy to see you practicing and improving. And if you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It's the best way to support us and to make sure you don't miss future episodes.
Exactly. We have many more topics coming up about speaking naturally, understanding fast English, and using the language in real situations. So stay tuned, and remember, real English is learned by living it, not just by studying it.
Thanks for joining us today. Go out there, use your English, and make it part of your everyday life. We'll see you in the next episode.